Yes. So we will start the class. Welcome back. And a moment. Okay. Should I chant or Divya, you want to try?
Okay. ॐ सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। कर्तुराज्ञया प्रकृते फलं कर्म किं परं कर्म तज्जनम् कृतिमहादधौ पतनकारणं फलं शाश्वतं गतिनिरोधकम् ईश्वरार्पितं नेच्छया कृतं चित्तशोधकम् मुक्तिसाधकम् कायवानमनः कार्यमुत्तमम् पूजनं जपश्चिन्तनं क्रमात् जगत् ईश्वरे जगत् ईशदीय
Shadiyuksevanam.
जगत ईषधीयुक्तसेवनम् अस्थमूर्तिभ्यः
Deva Pujanam.
देवपूजनम् उत्तमस्तवत् उच्चमद्धत चित्तजं जपत् ध्यान उत्तमम्
Dhyanamuttamam.
ज्ञानमुत्तमम् आज्यधारया प्रोक्तसासमम् सरलचिन्तनम् विरलतः परम् भेदभावना सोऽहमित्यसौ भावनाभिदा पावनी मता भावशून्यसद्भावसुस्थितिः भावनाबला भक्तिरुत्तमा हृत्स्थलैर्मनः स्वस्थता क्रिया भक्तियोगबोधाश्च निश्चितमम् वायुरोधनाल् मनः जालपक्षी सिवत् रोधसाधनम्
Jalpakshivat rodhasadhanam.
जालपक्षी पक्षिस्त जालपक्षी
Jalpakshivat rodhasadhanam.
जालपक्षिवत् रोधसाधनम् चित्तवाय कासश्चित्क्रिया युतः
Chittavayavaschit
चित्तवायवश्चित्क्रियायुता शाखयोर्द्वै शक्तिमूलका लय
शाखयोर्ध्वनि शक्तिमूलका
शा- शाख शाखयो दिवै शक्तिमूलका लय विनाशने उभयरोधने लयगतं पुनर्भवति नौवृत्तम् प्राणबन्धनात् लीनमानसम् एकचिन्तना नाशमेत्ययतः नष्टमानसौ कृष्टयोगिनः कृत्यंस्ति किं स्वस्थिं यतः
मानसोत्कृष्टयोगिनः
नष्टमानसौ कृष्टयोगिनः
नष्टमानसोत्कृष्टयोगिनः
नष्टमानसोत्कृष्टयोगिनः
कृत्यमस्ति किं स्वस्थितिं यतः
कृत्यमस्ति किं स्वस्थितिं यतः
Correct. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for attempting. So we are on these verses now, and I believe there is still a little doubt left with reference to Rit Sthala, because in verse 10, Ramana says that the aim of all spiritual practices, whatever one chooses for oneself, is ultimately, in the end, bringing the mind to its own center. And that center, he calls it as Rit. And Rit translation is generally heart. And because of the heart word, and we have an orientation to the word heart, there seems to be the connotation that it is referring to the physical heart. But Ramana clarifies it to say that this is not the physical heart. This is, if you want to use heart, call it the spiritual heart in translation. That's it. Rit basically means consciousness. There was a question answer session that Ramana's has been recorded in a very short booklet. This booklet is Meditation by of Ramana. It's a very small booklet. A.R. Natarajan. This is just a few question answers. And basically on the topic of meditation that 4-5 people must have asked him, and this has been compiled as answers. One of the questions that a devotee had asked was, what is the nature of the heart? This is on page 10. I'm reading it. I didn't want to type it, so I'm reading it. What is the nature of the heart? Does the spiritual heart beat? If it does not beat, then how is it to be felt? Because Ramana has been mentioning about the spiritual heart, it's not just the text. I'm sure this text is only a recorded version of his whole satsangs, whatever his vision of was for mukti. So this question must have obviously arisen in one of the answer sessions where he must have given a similar answer that Rit Sthala is where you meditate upon. So the questioner obviously is asking, does the spiritual heart beat? If it does not beat, then how is it to be felt? And the answer Ramana says is, this heart is different from the physical heart. Beating is the function of the latter, which means physical heart. The former, which means Rit here, is the seat of spiritual experience. That is all that can be said of it, because it is not something that is describable. For Ramana, it was an experience culminated because of all practices. And finally, when he has been able to bring it into this nutshell that we see in Upadesa Sara, and ultimately bringing it down to the meditation on the I. So the whole lineage, the whole chronology that he's able to present, this, he says, the Rith Sthala, all that can be said of it is the seat of spiritual experience. Just as a dynamo supplies motive power to whole systems of light, fans, etc., so the original primal force supplies energy to the beating of the heart, respiration, etc. Now this, you can see the answer moving into when he speaks of prana and the shakha yodhvayi. These are the two branches. If you manage one, you can manage the other. And based on this particular Ritsthala, we are clarifying Ritsthala. There was another question that was asked. Should I meditate on the right chest in order to meditate on the heart? Because Ramana says it's on your right side of the chest and not on the left side. So the questioner has asked, the devotee has asked, and this question, I think someone else also had a doubt. Whoever listens will start, anyone can have a doubt that should I then be focusing on the right side of my chest and say, okay, this is the spiritual heart, and should I pay attention to that side in my meditation? Ramana's answer is, the heart is not physical. Meditation should not be on the right or the left. Very significant answer. Meditation should be on the self. And this part will come later in the next 15 verses, last 15 verses. But because this is question answer, Ramana is bringing together. Meditation should be on the self. Everyone knows I am. Who is the I? It will be neither within nor without, neither on the right nor on the left. I am. That is all. The heart is the center from which everything springs. Because you see the world, the body, and so on, it is said that there is a center for these, which is called the heart. When you are in the heart is known to be neither the center nor the circumference. There is nothing else. Whose center could it be? These are extremely subtle words, and obviously he is speaking from the standpoint. It's like saying, if you've climbed the Everest and there's another person at the base, and the person at the Everest is describing the whole scene to us, whatever he's saying to us, we will only have more and more questions around it. We will never understand the answers that that person from the Everest is showing us, telling us that this is a vast expanse, and from here you can see this or this and that, or you will travel through this. None of this will be known to us except for mere some information, which to a person starting at the base seems to be almost an impossible feat. It looks like impossible, and you will only think it'll be some luck that I will ever reach the Mount Everest. So in certain portions, Ramana, when it talks about an established state, he kind of says these are not things that can really be explained. What can be explained is the whole road, is the journey, is the process by which, walking on which one reaches there. And those statements like this, fantastic statement. When you are in the heart means when you are abiding in that source. Now, heart here, we have translated it and understood it as source of consciousness, where everything is going to be emerging from. Your whole waking state emerges from. Your whole identity with the body emerges from. That sthan, that place, he says, when you are in that source, the heart is neither known to be the center nor the circumference. What is that source? It's not a limited thing. So you cannot say it is in the center or right or left. It is that source which is, it's like sun is not in the center or right or left. It is the light that is expressing everywhere. Known to be neither the center nor the, there is nothing else. And now comes a clinching statement. Whose center could it be? Whose center? Where is the reference point of the center? To say it is the center, I will become the reference point. But if I itself is seen as an object of thought, and the I has been traced back to its source of origin, which is consciousness, the source of I, if it has been traced back to it, then whose center is it? The I is dissolved. There is only the consciousness. There is only awareness. You call it Atman, you call it Brahman. In different terminologies, that's what he means. Then he said in another question, this pranayam and shakhayor. This is also another question that was asked. Someone had asked a question, I am hard worked and find little time to practice concentration. Are there any aids for it? Is control of breath a good aid? Now this comes to this 11th verse, Vayu Rodhanat Leena Manaha Jala Pakshivat Rodha Sadhanam. Ramana says breath is also one of the ways in which you can control your mind. You can subdue the mind. And so the answer, he says, is prana and mind arise from the same source. Shakhayodvai Shakti Mulaka Chitta Vayavash Chit Kriya Yutaha. Chit is mind, Vaya is prana, Vayu, prana, Vayu. Both of them endowed with the function of knowing and breathing. These are two shakhas. They both get their functions from the same source, the same root, and that root is Shakti. That is what he's saying here in different words, and I personally felt maybe these words will help connect a little better because it's another terminology with which, more clarity can be drawn into. I'm going to repeat this. Prana and mind. Pran, Shakti. And when we say pran, remember all 5 functions, all 5 pancha pranas. Pran and mind, antakaranam, all Shaktis in fact, arise from the same source. The source can be reached by holding the breath or tracing the mind. By holding the breath or tracing the mind. If you cannot do the latter, which means trace the mind, the former will no doubt be helpful. Regulation of breath is gained by watching its movements. And this is what we have done in our meditation sessions also. When you just watch the air going in an inhalation, exhalation. Regulation of breath comes with practice. So if you cannot watch the mind to its source, according to Ramana, in the later verses he's going to say that is going to be the direct path. But if you cannot watch the mind, you are not objective enough to see your nature of thoughts, to remain unidentified with thoughts. Thoughts are doing their leela, but you are not a part of that leela. If you cannot remain distant from your thoughts, then he says, breath control is a way to quieten the mind. And breath control means what? Not stopping the breath completely, but regulation of breath is gained by watching its movements. Just watching the movement of breath. Further, he added, also very insightful, if the mind is watched, thoughts cease. Peace results, and it is your true nature. King Janaka said, I have now found the robber, namely the mind, who has been robbing me of my I-ness. I will instantly kill this thief. I'm repeating. King Janaka said, I think it's Ashtavakra Gita. King Janaka said, oh, just here. Yeah, I think it is Ashtavakra Gita. King Janaka said, I have now found the robber, namely the mind, who has been robbing me of my I-ness. What is I-ness? What do you understand as I-ness?
The source that you're talking
This,
about.
yeah, see that beingness, ness, consciousness, beingness, I-ness. They're all synonyms. So this I-ness, from where the I comes, I is a thought. That I-ness, he says, I have found the robber, which is the mind, who has been robbing me of my I-ness. Means my mind which is full of thoughts, my mind which is all the time engaging my I, and I is a thought. So I seem to be all the time engaged in the objective realm of the world realm, not objective in the sense of objectivity, but I'm always engaged in the Triputi. I am the experiencer, as the experiencer of the world, sense objects. I seems to constantly remain entangled in the sense experiences, the world experiences. So I is always connected only to the sense and sense objects and sense experiences, and thereby there are relations, and thereby there is agitation, disturbance. He's going to say the mind is perturbed. I have now found, Janaka says. That means what? He has understood that what brings disturbance and agitation is this identification of the I with the senses, and that association being seen as real. So I have now found the robber, namely the mind, who has been robbing me of my I-ness. I will kill instantly this thief. Who's the thief?
The mind.
Mind. I will instantly kill this thief. Laya vinashane ubhaya rodhane. By regulation of breath, there will be quietude, but it will not be killed. I will instantly kill this thief means the I thought will be traced back. You can't eliminate the I. You can trace it back to I-ness. That consciousness, when it is traced back to its consciousness, the I thought, along with all other thoughts, they become secondary. They become just like they are just an objective realm of experience. The perturbation, owing to thoughts, appears to rob the self to its peace. Because of the I, when the I thought is associated with the world and objects and people and senses, and there's a whole loka vyavhara. He says this loka vyavhara appears to rob the self to its peace. The peace is robbed away. This perturbation is the mind. When that ceases, the mind is set to take flight. When there is complete peace regained, the mind takes a flight. The self remains as the undisturbed substratum. So the entire Akanksha, the self remains. I thought you were focusing. That's okay, no problem.
I woke up at 4 today, so which is a
Don't worry, you are on recorded mode, so don't worry. It's okay, no worries. The self remains as the undisturbed substratum. So this is what he talks about as the connection between prana and mind. And this I thought was a good way to summarize all these verses also in Ramana's own words which of course are translated. Ramana didn't say it in English, so these are all translated words. There's another question asked, which I think a lot of us still have a doubt regarding. Someone said, Shiva, Vishnu and Gayatri are said to be equally efficacious. Which should I meditate upon? However much I may have given an answer, somewhere I feel they are never convincing enough, because somehow that's my impression. So in his own words now, this is the answer. Anyone you like best. They are all equal in their effect, but you should stick to one. This is his way, and this is how Parampara says, this is how it is said. Now, if we still continue to feel that we can do 2 or 3, now this is how it is said, up to you, what you balance, how you balance, and all that. So these are just about, I thought, something that in the context of what we are now doing in this book, as Ramana has written, and maybe it will also help us to identify the depth at which he's saying. So there is a likelihood that we may approach this book with more depth and insight, because these are his words, and what they mean in another context, how he answered, brings more light even to these verses. So, Chit and Vayu, 2 functions, which means implies all the functions otherwise, are like Shakha Yodvai. If you are able to see the mind to its source, which he's going to talk about in the next few verses, that's the best to do, he says. But if you're not able to, then regulation of the breath, and regulation of the breath means watching its movement. That will bring about mind to resolve. And in that quiet mind, he will talk about it now in the later verses, that the real inquiry will begin and self will reveal itself. So now in 13th verse, he says, we've covered this also, Laya and Vinasha Ubhaya. So I'm just chanting this once because Divya, you said Ubhay. So Laya Vinashane Ubhaya Rodhane. Ubhaya, Sanskrit would be complete word, not like in Hindi. In Hindi it will be half year is okay, but in Sanskrit it must have the vowel with it. Ubhaya is the vowel. Ubhaya Rodhane. So what happens? Laya and Vinasha are both means for regulation, means for quietude, for taming of the mind. Now, when the first time we ever heard about self-growth, self-inquiry, it was equated to Shakespeare's taming of the shrew. And the shrew was the mind, how you tame the mind. So the whole play is the discussion around it was, if you remove the characters and you see how the shrew there, that was a female character, I've forgotten her name, is equivalent to the mind in us. So what Shakespeare over there was saying was, how will you tame this shrew, the mind in you? So taming of that mind, Ubhaya, both ways, Laya and Vinasha, both are the outcomes of the taming of the mind. But there is so much of a difference between the two. If the mind has been tamed by some sort, means, practices, means now it is quiet and is servile to you, Laya Katam, if the mind has gone into Laya, Punaha Bhavati, it will arise again. But if the mind has Vinasha, then Nahamritam, Namritam. When it is taken Vinasha, Punaha Na Bhavati, it will not rise again. Then what are these? What brings about Manolaya and Manonasha? Now he talks about the 2 practices again. Prana Bandhanat Leena Manasam. Just as the cage trapped the bird and took away its flight, if by the measure of pranayama, which is Ashtanga Yoga, which the entire steps, pranayama would only come at a later stage. It would be preceded by a lot of other steps. They are all a way in which to regulate your mind. That pranayama, bandhanat, leena manasam, it will bring about manolaya. And the characteristic of manolaya is questioning. What is the characteristic of manolaya?
It comes back up.
Excellent. So it comes back up. So that means the peace you would have attained will be a temporary measure. But it is subject to being disruptive again. It is subject to getting perturbed again. It is subject to being disturbed again. It is subject to the entire identification with the body and the world and the senses and relations and wants and frustrations and anger and sadness and samsara. It is subject to the entire samsara realm of experience. But it is helpful. For whom? For those who are still not into the practice of, or do not know how to, or are not able to, or for some reason and haven't yet picked up or do not have the know-how of how to do the inquiry self, which he's going to talk of, then pranayama is definitely helpful. It has to be sought. There's no other way. Either pranayama or the previous exercises, japa, upasana, any of them. So what is pranayama doing? It is doing manolaya. Eka chintanat, by the focus on eka chintanat, on ekam, advaitam. So where is the entire world resolved into? The entire world of sensory objects resolved into mind. Thoughts. So I am identified with the thoughts. The world is outside, but they are connected. All the thoughts are now connected to I. One. I thought. This I thought is further getting its light from, where is the knowledge of I coming from? Aham.
From
Vritti
the
is,
consciousness.
so that is ekachintanam. Absorbing yourself in that ekam, identifying with that ekam. First, for all of us, it is locating, though it is self-evident, we are trapped in the world of our own thoughts. We are completely, we are like, I think the good way of expressing it would be we are all animated beings trapped in our own world of I that we have generated. We are all animated, showing a lot of life and a lot of activity and a lot of experiences, and it's all within the realm of this I, trapped I with the objects. When this is shifted, the gaze is shifted. At the moment my gaze, that light is shifted, just illuminating the I trapped in the objects. But when this light illuminates the source from where it emerges, that is the light. So tracing it backwards, it's a very subtle observation. It's a very subtle, continuous observation. That, he says, is Eka Chintana. So that Chintanam should not be taken as another realm of objective thinking process. Because Chintanam to all of us means सोचना. सोचना means अब एक के ऊपर सोचना. अगर एक के ऊपर सोचोगे तो plural हो जाएगा. So ekam is infinite, ekam is unborn, ekam. But the idea is not to think that ekam is unborn, but idea is to find that source, which is already evident. Discover it. It's like how the minerals are already there in the world. You just have to discover them. In the diamond mines, what do? If anybody has ever visited a mine, diamond mine, coal mine, diamond mine, It would be very interesting. Or even a salt, where the salt comes from. There are salt mines. It's very fascinating to ever see. Not that I have been, but I can assume what it would be. Those mines would mean what? Because in that whole thing that just looks muddy, it's rocks, it's mud. The one who has an eye goes and picks up that rock and then polishes it. And that polishing of it brings out the diamond. The diamond was always there, but it was covered as if covered. That diamond's light, that diamond's property, which is still showing itself even through that muddy exterior, but that diamond's light was not as if coming out. It was not sparkling because of the covering of the mud. What is that muddy covering? That is this mind and its samsara gati. That he says, ekachintanam. Once it is there, then this mano, mind, takes a flight, goes away. It no longer can trap the eye. There'll still be vyavhara, but the eye is no longer trapped in the objects and relations. And that is the path of self-discovery. That is the path which Vedanta talks about. That is the purpose of Vedantic study. Then he says, Nashta manasot manasaha utkrishta yoginaha. Once the mind is, for whoever the mind is destroyed, he's an exalted yogi. So the one who's controlling the mind through, say, pranayama and has taken manolaya, even in samadhi, as I said, if it takes manolaya, between that yogi and Atma Vichari, who's also a yogi but never called a yogi because he's not on the path of yoga. Yoga darshan ka marg nahi follow kar raha. He has an Atma Vichar ka marg. That Atma Vichar marg has come clear because of Vedantic Adhyanam. He's not called a yogi otherwise. He's a yogi because he's pursuing the self. In that sense, yoga, yuj, dhatu, that binds you, that connects you. In that sense, everybody is a yogi. So between that yogi who's abiding through pranayama or ashtanga yoga and even in samadhi has attained manolaya, and the one who has destroyed the mind, if again, who is superior, who is better? He says, Utkrishta. He's an exalted yogi who has been successful to destroy the mind itself. And again, please, Nashta Manasaha would not mean destroyed. Mar gaya, khatam hi ho gaya, to fir where will you perceive the word from? As these question answers have very clearly explained, it means when you are abiding in the source, the whole thing is just a movie. It's like a movie. You are unidentified with it because now the eye has, which is habitually trapped for us, आदत है हमारी ये, नई आदत बनाई है through practice, और वो जो उसमें abide कर रहे हैं, उसमें फिर अब ये trapping नहीं है. Samsara gati is gone. He says that exalted being who has destroyed the mind, krityam asti kim. What is left for him to do? What is now left for such a one to do? Krityam. What is there? Kim asti. What is left? Swasthitim yataha. He now is yataha, the one who was putting yatnam, effort. जो प्रयत्नम कर रहा था, जो प्रयत्न कर रहा था, उस प्रयत्नशील को जो योगी है, जो यति है, these are all parallel words. वो जो योगी और जो यति है, प्रयत्नशील, once he abides in his own source, swasti, swa asti, अपने आप में when he is centered, he is abiding, what is now left for him to achieve or to do? He is kritakrityaha. Upanishad calls such a person as a kritakrityaha. He has achieved the purpose of his life. There is now freedom. There is nothing left for him to do. There is no work left for him. He is now living on the planet. As long as his prarabdha karma is there, he will live on the planet as a free being. And maximum whatever he will do will only be loka sangraha. Whatever he will do will become loka sangraha. It will be born from his sense of compassion. It will be born from his just a sense of identification of avidya, what avidya can do to people and how they are trapped in samsara. So, nashtamanasot krishta yoginaha krityamasti kim swasthitam yataha. Now comes the 16th verse. Drishyavaratam chittam atmanaha chitvadarshanam tattvadarshanam. Drishyavaratam chittam atmana chitvadarshanam tattvadarshanam. Drishyavaratam. Whatever is seen. Varata means withdrawn. So drishyam would mean
देखना
Drishyam is view.
is
देखना
what?
Drishyam is the view.
The view, correct? What did you say, Divya?
देखना देखना to see.
देखना. So जिस चीज को तुम देख रहे हो, किसको देख रहे हो? What is the view? You're right.
From the world. तो
From the
उस दृश्य से हम withdraw कर जाएं.
हाँ. So दृश्य दिख कहाँ रहा है? Is it the world?
No, in the mind.
Exactly. So what you are seeing in the mind as the world outside, दृश्यम जो दिख रहा है in the mind, withdrawn from that. When you're withdrawn from them, then chittam atmanaha. Then you see the source, which is of the chit, which is consciousness, atmanaha, within oneself, atma. Mind, withdrawn from the world, sees its own source as consciousness. Chittva darshanam, tattva darshanam. Seeing the source as of chit, consciousness, which is the source of chit, that itself is tattva darshan. Vahi tattva hai. Maya world, correct. Yes, good. Excellent. Drishyam is the Maya world, but seen here in the mind. Remaining withdrawn from it. The yati, the prayatnam, the one who has the prayatnam of not carrying away with the mind. Such a yati, he holds the mind, then sees the source of the mind, and that source of the mind is nothing but pure light, pure consciousness, pure knowledge, which may be just words to all of us, because where are we standing in the mountaineering club?
बॉटम में खड़े हैं
Kaha?
बॉटम में
At the base camp. Still at the base camp.
We are at the base camp. We have got the desire to join the mountaineering club, but we are no experts yet, most of us. So we are still at the base camp. We are not absolutely disinterested. We are not completely involved in the world and losing our vision there. We are not totally trapped in the samsara or the bhoga realm. We are not completely caught up in life and relations and activities. There is a certain withdrawal. We have the interest to know the truth. We have the interest for some higher gati. We have at least recognized the need for peace. What will give my mind some long-lasting peace? We have appreciated that, and that in path we have already started. That has brought us to base camp. Now from base camp onwards, there can only be the one who has traveled to the peak before who can help us travel again from the base to the peak. So that Sherpa is needed, that guide is needed, that Jnani is needed. That Jnani here, Ramana, he says, once the Chitta source is identified as the mind, that itself is Tattvam. Tattvam. Remember from Tattvam, Tattvabodh, Tattva word we analyzed a lot. The essence, the true nature, without which nothing else can exist. That is Tattva Darshanam. And now the question will arise, how is Manonasha possible? What is the path of Manonasha? So here, 17th verse onwards, it is a complete shift of a gear. The first 14 verses, 15, 16 are kind of binding verses. The first 13 verses, 14 verses is completely giving us the vision of all spiritual activities which are indirectly aiding to peace of mind. Manolaya. 17th verse onwards, Ramana has shifted the gear, completely Jnana Kand. That was Karma Kand, Upasana Kand of Veda. Now he is entering the Jnana Kand, which is the Vedanta part. How is that reflection? How is the Mananam? How is the Nididhyasanam that is on after Shravanam? How is this process of Atma Vichar going to bring about Manonasha? Atma Vichar, in other words, is the direct means for Manonash. Okay. So this, I think, okay, let's do this. Manasam tu kim margane krite. Manasam tu kim margane krite. Naiva manasam marga arjavat. If you don't read the translation, is there any word you can identify and understand? I'm sure Akanksha is already glued to the screen, so I'm sure you've already read the translation.
No, Marg, no, I haven't looked so much, but Marg is the path.
Correct. Marg is the path.
So how does the mind, Manasa Tukim Margani Krite, Manas कैसे मार्ग बताएगा? मतलब मन का कैसा इंक्वायरी करो कि मार्ग पता चले or something like that.
Excellent. Very good. One layer of understanding. Anything else? Don't read the translation. Just fix the mind on the verse, because these verses are so simple that you will start understanding when you first read them as is. Translation should only be a help. You should not depend on translation.
Naiva would be na eva manasam marg arjavat. Arjav means to put together, I think.
Arjam is okay. Arjam.
So na hi man marg.
Arjavam is actually straight path.
Okay.
Seedha rasta. Arjavam is a quality, straightforwardness. This Arjavam is one of the divine qualities, Daivi Sampat.
So maybe this is talking about how if you were to go down to the source of the mind, that is the straight path to figuring out.
And what will you figure out? Naiva Manasam, there is nothing called the mind. Mind has no existential substance. Excellent, Akanksha. Manasam tu kim? Margane krite. Start thinking along the marg. Krite, karna. उस मार्ग के साथ सोचना शुरू करो. To start the self-inquiry, the first question that can be asked is, Manasam tu kim? What is the mind? What is really this mind? Manasam tu kim? And there'll be a lot of interpretations to this word itself, because unless somebody has arrived at the right inquiry, we are only going to be shooting in the dark to understand what does it mean by what is the mind. We all seem to be certain we understand the mind. Ramana says, start the inquiry along the direction of what is the mind. Kim? Kya hai ye man? Kim manasam? Then what will happen? Tu, indeed. What will be suddenly someday, after maybe weeks or months or years of trying to question this? It won't be 1 day or 2 days sitting over a cup of tea or coffee that I thought of, अच्छा आज हम बैठ के सोचते हैं mind क्या है? You know, it's not an objective inquiry like the mind kya hai. That means I again have to go along the thoughts. If I'm engaging the thoughts to understand the mind, that is not mind inquiry. What is the mind? What is the mind? This thing called the thought, what is its source? कहाँ से ये emerge हो रहा है? I even lose words, I don't know. How am I becoming a perceiver of thoughts? We are always utilizing our thoughts. We seem to know our thoughts, or we also seem to know what we don't know. What I know, I know. What I don't know, I know. ये जो सब मन के अंदर बैठ के, all this is called मन. These thoughts that appear to be so real and have as if an existence of their own. पता नहीं कहाँ से आते हैं. हम लोग कहते नहीं है, पता नहीं मुझे ये विचार कहाँ से आ गया, पता नहीं ये मेरे मन में क्या चल रहा है, पता नहीं कहाँ से आ गया थॉट, कहाँ से आया, पता नहीं is that ignorance. And all of us have said it. Is this right? Has every one of us ever used the word, पता नहीं, how am I thinking like this? पता नहीं ये thought कहाँ से आ गया? Haven't we used it so many times in the, है ना? I don't know how हिंदी में it's better. पता नहीं मैं ऐसा क्यों सोच रही हूँ, पता नहीं ये विचार कहाँ से आया, पता नहीं ये मेरे मन में ये क्यों हो रहा है ऐसे, पता नहीं मैं क्यों दुखी हूँ, पता नहीं मैं क्यों सुखी हूँ, पता नहीं कि ऐसा क्यों हुआ, पता नहीं क्यों नहीं हो रहा, कि पता नहीं. That means I am trapped. I have trapped that source of light into only that which is manifest. He says here, look beyond that. When you start seeing the very source of mind, what is the mind? That inquiry will bring you to the mind source. Then you will realize, one day it will become clear. Mind is not there. Naiva manasam. There is no thing called mind. There is no thing called mind. And that is the straight inquiry. Many people have said, Ramana has used this Marga Arjavat. Many places he says this is a straight path, this is a straight inquiry. So as if Ramana has an independent path he's talking about, and that straight path is what is his path. No. That will be another layer of delusion added. He is only saying this is the shortest cut to know yourself, shortest route. But for that shortest route for you to apply, your mind should have at least have the objectivity developed from the other spiritual practices. Then this will come to the point. If you're already able to do, means you've done it somewhere in the past. This is the shortest, quickest way. If you can look at it, Ramana says you don't need all those practices. The Karam Kand part of practices are not needed. This is a straight path. Okay? And that he now explains further in the 18th verse tomorrow. And how
But will this lead to moksha?
that is moksha. When a person will abide in their own source, that source is Atman. You are freed of the sense of individuality. That is moksha. Moksha
Since you will not come back to the world
because you
again.
will not be trapped again in delusion.
Okay, so
If
your
you come
knowledge
back,
will
also
be
you come
complete.
back by will. By will means what? Who comes by will?
Where your your karma is finished, but for lok sangrah, like you
So
mentioned,
who can come like that?
someone who's realized.
Who? In our Shastra, what do we call them?
Avatar.
These are the Avatara Purush who will only come, they have no desire to fulfill. They have no personal gains to get. They only come for the sake of rectification of dharmas. Because the laws have to be, the srishti still continues for those who are not, who are still within it. Okay, so we will continue this tomorrow. And Divya?
ॐ सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखात् भवेत् ॐ स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्य परिपालयन्तां न्यायेन मार्गेण महीं ब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यं लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु काले वर्षतु पर्जन्यः पृथ्वी सस्यशालिनी देशोऽयं शोभरहितः ब्राह्मणाः सन्तु निर्भयाः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Oh, thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Ji, is there a so our Srishti that means is infinite?
Mhm. It
Means
is.
like till the time there is someone who is still trapped in their desires, it will go on continuing.
Yes, excellent. Yes. That is why it is Anadi and in a way Ananta, you know, because and there will, for it to resolve completely, not to have a srishti at all means there should be no avidya. And that is why the klesh is there. Why is there so much fighting all the time, and why is there so many, every few decades you have wars and you have diseases and you have conflicts and you have, you know, some small relief comes. I always give the example, observed it in one of the summers in Delhi, when it gets to peak summer and 2, 3, 4 days of peak summer, somehow nature gives a little respite by some shower, some pleasantness in the weather. You just get about that little respite, and then again the summer picks up. And I said, ek do baar hota hai in the whole season, and then the rain season starts because the heat has already generated the cycle. Exactly. That's exactly what human life, actually life everywhere is. For other pranis, it's even more struggling. And that is why Vedas give out the 4 Purusharthas. That these are very real experiences when they are seen as, in avidya, they are seen as real, not that they are real experiences. So till the avidya is there, till you do not know their source is pure, is complete, till that source is not discovered, avidya is functioning as I thought, and whatever you do with an I thought is generating the cycle of karma and bhoga. Excellent. I hope you're getting the whole picture now. Better at least. Is that okay? So we'll end the question. Yes, there was once a question also asked in the context of this infinite srishti. I think that means the infinite jivas and something like this. If the question was, there are infinite jivas, so or finite jivas. They're not finite jivas. Then there's something like finite jivas and Actually, what happens in a Srishti is every Srishti, Kal, will be conducive for a certain set of experiences only. So those whose karmas are maturing for that are born in that. So at a point, as if it looks like there are only certain numbers. So why is the population increasing, etc. And these are irrelevant questions. That cycle is going to be endless till you step out of it and discover your own source. Till then, you are a part of the cycle. Okay. So we will end the class. Thank you, everyone.